appropriate distance from the tree and whatnot. We'll be happy to come back and share that plan with you, even if there's not a public notice requirement. Again, there's no CPR hearing, but
For signage.
yeah, and there'll be a part for that. So.
All right, thank you very much. Is any other questions?
These are probably questions that come from the design review board, but the things that came to mind were obviously the access for deliveries, which is always kind of a challenge with these sort of satellite pads. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, there's been a lot of effort made in the last decade and a half to make Chatsworth kind of an inviting street for pedestrians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we should have a nice dinner over here.
Well, great, glad to hear it. My point is, you're moving the structure essentially up. There's. I'll use my very bad 3D here, but here's the street. Here's the little strip of grass. There's the rise up to the parking lot level. Mm-hmm. Structure's back here. You're talking about moving it up here, which, although it's not actually a change in massing of the building per se, but from the sidewalk looking up, you're going from, here's our little retaining wall with the lot, and now we're going from retaining wall, lot, building.
Right.
So, in a strictly aesthetic sense, if you are tucked up in that corner the way you got it, it is going to be significantly more of a mass. Mm-hmm. So, and I realize you're trying to, as we discussed earlier, trying not to move the driveway, and I get that, but the flip side is, if there was, patio type effect or something along the side, so it's not quite so abrupt, so you don't end up with the Great Wall kind of impact when you're walking along the street there. And frankly, it adds a little more to the pedestrian feel too. And again, that's a DRB question, but I know the folks on the south side aren't you, so they're not your sins, but the reality is that satellite building where the Waffle Place and the Baskin Robbins, it all looks fine from inside the shopping center, but from the outside of the shopping center, when you're walking on Chatsworth Street, it's just another blank wall. So it'd be kind of nice to avoid that.
Right. And there's I know what you're talking about. You're talking about just having a big, solid wall.
Well, there's already a retaining wall,
right,
which is 4 feet, 5 feet, and then you're gonna have a building which is gonna be how tall?
20
feet? Okay. So, yeah, and I understand the building's not, the mass effect of the height of the building, what you have now is one thing, but you're talking about moving it right up onto essentially to the edge of the retaining wall, which essentially quadruples that mass right there at the corner of Lindley and Chatsworth. And I think everybody appreciates seeing work done, and certainly they appreciate having more options in terms of dining, and we're all very happy with the fact that the neighborhood, the centers are being maintained and improved. Just these little things, and you'll be amazed, I think, at how much happier the community might be.
Right.
I'll leave it at that.
Right. That makes sense.
Thank you.
I understand the comment.
All right. Yeah, man.
Real quick, when do you think you'll have the formal plans done, the architectural plans, so this comes to any kind of committee, or is this just?
We're really starting
timeline?
very early right now.
Okay.
We think it's a few weeks at best, several weeks before we have our architect involved, but it may be sooner, maybe a little later, but that's probably the best estimate.
Will you have a leasing first?
What's that?
Will you have it leased first before you?
We'll definitely have a lease before we start construction, and we'll kind of have a conversation with the tenant, advance the plan a little bit. It's kind of an iterative process. So
our first step was
started
trying to figure out if this is something we could do before I really engage all the tenants. So now we kind of have some clear direction. So now I get to start really engaging a little bit more.
I think it's fair to say by the time you see this at design review, we'll know who the tenant is, because these tenants have very specific building requirements, and so that will have to be in the plan that you ultimately see. So the timing will work out that way.
But the only other thing I would mention is there's no signage now. And if you're talking about moving the structure basically bang up into the corner, I would expect your tenant is probably going to agitate for that, and that's something I would think you probably need some kind of communication with DRB and frankly the community, because as you notice, there's not much signage on the blank wall of the analogous building on the south side. And, you know, again, it's tiny steps, but people are really kind of happy that things are not as garish as they could be.
Sure.
Something to take with you, I would think.
Maybe windows would help.
Pardon me?
Windows would help.
Windows would be lovely.
Yeah.
Windows, patio.
Wall trellises.
We would fully
Step-
expect this to be a four-sided architecture,
Yeah.
Yes.
for example.
Nice.
I mean, step back even a
Yeah.
little bit, just so it's not that,
Right, it wouldn't be just a solid,
yeah.
it would be, there'd be architectural articulation and
Mhm.
maybe some green, wall trellises and definitely some elements that break it up.
The thing that would be disconcerting, certainly to me, would be if it goes from a 5-foot retaining wall to a 5-foot retaining wall plus a 20-foot structure. Because although, yeah, you're not changing the mass of the building per se, other than expanding it, but the fact that you're relocating it out to the edge of the perimeter, that adds significantly to the way it's gonna look.
Right.
We'll
Just a
take that
thought.
into consideration.
Jim, go ahead.
Last question. How long do you think the construction and what's your timeline for getting all this in?
You wanna talk about this?
So,
KFC
the KFC doesn't come up until February 18th. So, that's why we're kind of trying to get ahead of it right now, to try to figure out, but I'd probably get everything teed up, that when we do get that space back, then we are fully engaged in running, like getting our plans into, the city and then,
Well, it would happen well before that.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think by the time KFC comes up for expiration, we would be ready to start construction very shortly.
And
Yeah.
how long would the construction last is what I meant to say.
Probably a 4-6 month construction period.
Probably around 4.
Yeah.
So, end of the second quarter of 18, basically.
Yeah, it's probably the best estimate right now.
All right, we wanna, if
Thank you
there's
for-
no other questions, we wanna thank you very much for coming and presenting. You're certainly welcome to sit through the other agenda items, or you're welcome to go ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you for
Thank you for having us.
I'm gonna leave some cards here as well.
That'd be great, thank you.
Okay, we'll go on to the second agenda item, which is 17525 Chatsworth. Cindy Wu had put that in. She is not here today, but I'll open that up. If anybody has any comments on that poll or any discussion you'd like to have?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, hearing there's no discussion from the board or from the public, we'll go on to the next action, the next item. The next item was also one that Cindy had put on, LA DWP Power Integration Resource Plan. And she was gonna speak to that. Is there any public comment or board comment on that? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item. The next one is the council ordinances, A, B, and C, and 5. And Maria is going to speak to those. So we'll go ahead and start with the vending sidewalk process. Maria?
Just very briefly, the sidewalk street vending has been actually decriminalized, and it will now be an ACE ordinance type of a thing that they will be cited for. Now, whether the ordinance and when it will be coming forward as to what different areas want to propose that kind of a thing. I know that our council member at one time was perhaps thinking about carve-out districts just as the same as it was with the mural ordinance. So, right now, that's how that stands, so nothing new on that, no decisions to be made, nothing that we need to decide on.
Okay, is there any other public comment or board comment on that item? Okay, we'll move, hearing none, we'll move on to B. Maria?
The baseline manualization has passed, a whole new ordinance, it was supposed to be streamlined, but actually it had included, hillside regulations and that kind of a thing. So, it'd be interesting to see how this compares to the Granada Hills RFA. The RFA still seems to be tighter, but, here's the new ordinance, and basically I'd just like to bring it to the committee's attention, so you're aware that this kind of a thing has gone through. Unfortunately, time passed, we could not weigh in. I think individuals across the city, we weighed in individually, but our council didn't weigh in on that particular ordinance.
Any board comment or any public comment on that item? All right, hearing none, we'll go to C, accessory dwelling units. Maria?
The ADU ordinance has, basically, there's been a decision made at the city. It was last month, middle of March, and right now there has been some discussion, and I need to still get to Matt Glesney. I've left him several phone calls as to, are we still going to, as neighborhood councils or anything like that, be able to weigh in on this ordinance whatsoever? It can basically default to the state, which is far or less intensive, but cities do have the option of making an ordinance that's more suited to them and what the accessory dwelling can really be like. So, to be continued.
Have they created a council file on that?
Oh, yes, it's here. I have
Is it?
it listed. I have it listed.
I want to thank you, Maria, on the accessory dwelling units. Any board comment or public comment on that item?
I just had a question. What is the new one that they're asking?
Well, basically, they're looking at defaulting back to the state regulations. It's very loose.
Which is what?
1,200 feet for, 1,200 square feet for a separate unit, and I guess it can be 30% of the attached. But, I need to be a little more clear with Matt Glesney, because, I'm wondering if the discussion has been across the city that the neighborhood councils and neighborhood organizations were supposed to be given ample time to come and have a transparent process and put some feedback into this, and we're all wondering what happened to that process. So, right now, that's
No open houses, no forums, no nothing.
yeah, I know, and it just boomed. I know, that's been the criticism, so we're wondering what happened to that, yeah. Shucks.
Thank you, Jim.
Shucks.
There's no other comments. We'll go on to questions. We'll go on to number 5. Maria's going to speak to that also.
Very briefly, this is just something else for the committee to be aware of. I think the deadline to reply to that particular item will be either middle of April, and this is to lessen restrictions with parking and massing with certain buildings and to increase affordable housing that are located in transit districts. So this is something that you had brought up and you had a question about. So I think that this is something that we need to really look at closely, evaluate, because we will be hopefully can be making some comments and weighing in on this particular item. This is a citywide ordinance that will affect Granada Hills and the entire city.
Well, and if I can speak just really quickly.
Thank you, Fran.
And I do have a note here, whether I can get to it is a different question, but there is some very tentative mapping as to where these transit corridors are. It's not quite as obvious as you would think. It's not just where there's a subway, it's not just where there's a light rail, it's not just where there is bus rapid transit. It also can be simply where there are 2 high-capacity bus lines within a certain distance, and there's no definition. I actually asked the person who moved that out to us, and let's see if I can find it. But I asked him, well, what's the definition? He said, well, we don't have one, per se. And I said, well, give a map yet. And he gave me a map that was unreadable because the reproduction was so bad. At least on what I saw, it looked like there's at least a site on Devonshire that apparently qualifies. So I would suggest that we ask for a presentation.
Yes.
And actually have them explain what would be required, where. I mean, if it doesn't fall within Granada Hills South or right on the border, okay, fine, it's moved, we can leave it be, but it's very unclear to me if in fact
It affects
us directly or not.
Okay, good question.
And along those lines, just something I want to share is there is a proposal for a transit line, probably a dedicated bus line on Devonshire. I'm sorry, on Nordhoff, west from the freeway, that would eventually tie in on the other side of the freeway with the proposed light rail line that would go up Van Ness Boulevard. And the light rail is in the Measure M plan. So in essence, along with the orange line being converted to light rail and electrified, there would be a complementary line parallel to 405, which is east of it going to Van Nuys. And you look at it on a map, it's like, okay, well, there's the orange line on the south side of the valley, and there's there's nothing north of that going east-west. So what I've seen is being considered, and we all know that it's being considered, it means it's in the plan, because we don't actually find out about it when it's still being considered, is a dedicated bus line of some type on Nordoff that would serve Cal State Northridge, obviously. Tie in, probably go all the way out to the Orange Line out in Chatsworth, and then tie into this light rail line going up Van Nuys or parallel to Van Nuys. So the point being, if there's a dedicated BRT or rapid bus or whatever they're talking about for Nordoff, it's entirely possible that these surface bus lines that would serve that for the, the last mile, so to speak, those could get up Devonshire, they could get up Balboa. I mean, we might end up with one or more of these nexi of bus transit, which allow these additional developments of mass and density and stuff like that. So I would like us to formally request a briefing for them to come out to an NC meeting.
This would be DOT.
Yeah. Actually come out and lay out exactly what they're talking about, and, they don't have to, it doesn't have to be Metro, but they should be able to say, this is how it currently qualifies, whether it's in Granada Hill South or not, and this is what could happen if in fact this dedicated bus line, rapid bus, whatever they're actually.
The plan I originally saw for Van Nuys Boulevard was a bus line, not a light rail. Is it changed?
They're talking about bumping it to actually
Bumping it
light
to
rail.
light rail?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So, and that of course, I mean, that adds to the traffic, the load on the line, which kind of cascades on that you need additional lines to feed it. And, I mean, which, part of the reason I didn't get here on time was the 405 was a mess and I was over the hill, but nonetheless, so I mean.
Should have seen fine.
Okay, well, all right, I am not worthy, but anyway, I mean, we all understand that there's a need for transit, but at the same time, it'd be nice to be aware of these things before they suddenly pop up, and we can actually try
And what they intend to
be,
accomplish.
right, well, and be aware of.
So do we want that at the committee level or at the board level?
I would, just in the sense if we can get, I think we get more interest and more attention at the board level, so if we could make the request, maybe for the May meeting? Because if they're talking about it now, I mean, I got the memo.
Yeah, I've got
Yeah.
LA Airport breathing down my neck to get on the agenda. I put them off for this month.
Van Nuys?
No, LAX.
Oh, who cares?
I know.
We go talk to Westchester and, I mean, that's their issue.
They're doing it city.
Fine. That's great, but, I mean, unless it's
Put
Van
them off- Put them
Nuys,
off for 3 months.
put them off for 3 more. I'd much rather know about the potential impact on our community from additional bus lines than what may or may not happen. I mean, I know there's a million things going on in LAX, but.
Yeah. We went to-
Well, I think the thing we have to watch out for this is them having a transit-oriented district.
Right, exactly.
Mixed use, and that could go, I don't know if it's 1/4 mile now, or they want to expand it to half a mile. And that means they could do one of those, real dense projects there. Now, some places it might be good, like up Zelza and things like that. But other places, it's definitely not good if you
Well,
get one of the quieter, smaller streets.
I don't think any of us are disagreeing, it's just, I
Yeah.
think we should ask for a formal presentation if we can get them
Know what that means?
as soon as possible, because this is all going forward, I mean.
It's moving quickly.
Well, obviously, what's driving Metro is the Olympics, everybody knows that, right?
Oh.
I mean, that's why I'll just share my own knowledge being in the industry. There are RFPs going right, left, and sideways out of Metro on a weekly basis at this point for program management, construction management, project management, you name it. And every single project, they're looking to increase, to jump from bus rapid transit to light rail, to go from light rail to sub, I mean, you name it. How that all jives with the questions of how much federal funding there may be, God knows, but things with Measure around, there's a big pot of local money, and they want to spend it, and they want to spend it before the Olympics, because that's the deadline everybody's driving for, so.
All right, sounds like something you're gonna discuss with the neighborhood council as well.
Well, if we want a DOT presentation, we'll need to contact them and see who they can bring out.
Okay.
I have,
I'll talk about that.
Yeah, all right,
We'll
that's
coordinate that.
okay, so that's my input such as it is.
All right, any other input or comment? All right, if not, we'll move on to continued business. And this is the update of the San Fernando and Mission Boulevard.
Woodley.
San Fernando Mission and Woodley, that's an ongoing project. The builder has come back and is proposing some changes to that. I think most people are aware, but for those that may not be, feel free to, and most of you have been at most of those meetings. But some of the things that they're planning on doing is now having major access off of Woodley by Bull Creek. And by doing that, they'll be able, major access off San Fernando Mission by Bull Creek. That's right.
That's right.
And Woodley, the driveway right there by the school will be eliminated. So that should create a better entrance and exit for the property. They've also are looking at proposing now 292 units. 190 of those would be condos, and 102 of those would be townhouses. The height of the property would be layered, but would max out at 45 feet, just because of the grade of the property and how it's designed. It's our understanding that there would be some moderate income that would be provided for within the project. There will be a community room. They're looking at additional soils and geological testing closer to Bull Creek. And they're also looking at redoing or reviewing the existing DOT traffic analysis. So those are some of the major highlights of what the builder's looking at. The builder, or the developer, I should say, is planning on coming back and meeting with the community. That hasn't been scheduled yet. So at this point, any board comment? Anybody like to add anything? Public comment? Jim?
What happened to the queue conditions there and the need for the, are they just blowing those off?
Well, technically, there aren't any queue conditions on there anymore. There's
How
one-
did that happen? I
Well, what happened was when we folded in all of those properties, all the odd properties to the specific plan, and created the new height restrictions and other restrictions, planning department, as far as I know, eliminated the queue conditions,
They did.
correct?
They did. Yes,
So
they
there
did.
are no queue conditions on that property at this point.
Can they do that? Queue condition is like a zoning change.
I
Probably
guess
more.
because part of, Jim, that's a very good question.
When did that happen?
Probably
Effective when
new community
the
plan.
new community plan became
The
effective.
specific plan. That's a very, very good question, because the queue conditions on that property were quite limited, you know. I think there was a 30-foot height limit and a 15-foot setback on some of the buildings, and it just kind of vanished.
Did we ever hear about it or get notification?
Well, the planning department told us what they were doing.
Told
It
us.
wasn't like a secret.
No, but the
No,
planning
I-
department decided to pull a lot of the Q conditions and the P conditions back when the community plan was being revised. And I think a good question can be asked to, you know, before those Q conditions, and I think several people in this room were very aware of that. We asked for certain things to be done that never got done, but that could be an issue of contention. Because I think the planning department, since they basically pulled those conditions because we were told that they would be redundant. A lot of the Q conditions and the P conditions on some of these commercial properties were pulled because they felt that they were redundant.
The height condition is what concerns me. It's not a redundant condition because they're
Yeah,
saying
it's
you
not a
can go
redundant. It was a
45
lot
and
lower. It
the
was
other
not
one did the
redundant.
bonus density 54 or something. So, when I was helping you guys on the planning thing, I cut out a year and a half out before it was finally determined. I remember he specifically said, because of the project over here, we want those queue conditions.
You remember that?
I had
Okay,
notes
all
on it
right, I'm
too.
glad you,
No, it's not something, and I don't think it's something that's just, oh, okay, because that's what they're doing.
Not only, you know, this project that we're pointing, but that was all projects that were within the areas. They were supposed to evaluate the queue conditions. They were supposed to have a list,
a matrix.
And what happened?
matrix.
We just went ahead with it.
Well, I think at the time, as Murray had said, the understanding was that the city ordinances would be as restrictive as the queues, or the queue ordinances would remain.
There was a lot of pounding on that particular issue, just so you know.
But it appears that may not have happened in this
But
case.
it went forward.
So it's a good issue to raise.
Mhm.
Is Granada Hills North actually even still digging in their heels on this to any degree, or are they just throwing up their hands?
No,
Well,
they're
I'm not
siding
throwing
with
up
the
their hands.
developer,
I
you know
think-
why.
I think bringing it down from 440 apartments and 54-foot height to
192?
292 condos, which was a huge issue for the neighborhood. That was one of their biggest issues, was they didn't want apartments there because they didn't feel there'd be a pride of ownership, and it would be a target for just the entire neighborhood going down the tubes. So the fact that they agreed to put in condos, and they're all condos, whether townhouses or flats, was big for the neighborhood. I think that was probably the determinative factor, frankly.
If you have DOT come to a neighborhood council meeting, maybe they can also talk about this project.
Well, one of the things we could ask them, I think, because it's right at our border, is the possibility of putting a light there, wherever that driveway is. Because that, putting a light there would be a huge mitigation for the traffic. Yeah, it would mean you have another stop on San Fernando Mission if they're going to Sepulveda or Woodley, but it certainly would mitigate a lot of the traffic problems, so. And really, if you stop and think about it, most of the turns out of there, if the egresses at San Fernando Mission are gonna be right-hand turns. Because if you want to go west on San Fernando Mission out towards Chatsworth, then you're gonna make a right. If you wanna go east on the 118, you're gonna make a right and get on the freeway at Havenhurst. So you're gonna make 3 rights there to get on the freeway. So that was one of the reasons that we suggested the egress be changed, because you're not gonna have as many people wanting to take a left-hand turn. Most people are gonna be taking the freeway, which means a right-hand turn. Either the only people that are gonna be wanting to turn left are people that wanna take surface streets, either Sepulveda Boulevard or further on, which is probably a minority of the people getting out of there. Most people, if they're going to South Valley, are gonna need to take Balboa or Cedar Boulevard, so it's all right turns.
All right, the figures that the information the builder gave was proposed. They're gonna come back and provide some more detail to us with the actual information as it gets. Hopefully within the next few weeks, we hope to see something.
Well, yeah, we may wanna just, if they do it, have a joint plum meeting with Granada Hills North, schedule a joint meeting with them, and so everybody gets the information at one time. That would be my suggestion. So if they're gonna be coming back next month, I think they meet the 4th Wednesday anyway, right?
Yeah, the same night as we, or supposedly.
Yeah, so the joint meeting would be an easy way to go.
All right, any other comments on the Woodley project? And we'll go to number 2, early notification notice. This is a lot line adjustment between 2 adjacent properties to create 2 equal lots. Cindy Wu has that information, was gonna speak to it. Unfortunately, she's not here. Is there any public comment, or is there any board comment?
What's the location on that thing?
There's no address.
She just gives a case number.
Oh, just, okay, well, then we probably need to carry it over to the next meeting.
It's not
Says
too late to
application
make a
date
comment.
12/29? does that mean?
Probably means 2 to be better.
I hope so, because that would be probably way too late, if there's anything to comment on.
No, it's this year.
It's December of this year.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think that's a typo.
We'll have to ask Cindy on that also.
And up above it said December 27th for informational meeting.
I believe there was a December
Was that last
27th
December?
last year.
Okay.
There's been several informational meetings.
That was the women's club, were you
Yeah,
there?
okay, yeah.
Mhm.
But that sounds like that's when.
That was a December 27th meeting about that project.
Okay, we'll go to number 4. Those are the upcoming events. I don't know that those need to be discussed unless somebody has any comments. Okay, at this time, we'd have any committee member comments and submission of any agenda items this time, committee? Hearing none. We appreciate the public and all that have been here. Is there any comments from any of the public or any?
Either of the public. Either of the public.
All three of you.
Three grammatically.
We want to thank you very much for being here and supporting the committee and hearing about various things within the community. With that, we'll go ahead. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, by Brad, a second. Maria, all in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned at 8:09.
Thank you.